and and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just really excited to have you joining. And honestly, My Own Worst Enemy was a book that has been in my dream space, honestly, for 6+ years. I worked for other people for a long time, and it's funny how people can have different experiences in life. I talk to my sister all the time about it. I had a terrible work experience. I've worked for several bosses that have been in what I would say like the devil incarnate, where I just felt very underappreciated, and really used, and kind of told to be put in my place. You're here for this reason, so stick to your lane. And I got tired of that over time, and it was just very draining, really bad for my mental health. Which is funny because my sister, she's like, how are you an entrepreneur? It's so hard. But she's had a very different experience, right? Where she has had really amazing bosses, has been really encouraged to use her PTO for mental health time, to go on vacation, things like that. So her experience in life has been very different, and it's impacted the way that she thinks and feels differently than it does me. And so what's really interesting about especially the topic of imposter syndrome is that it can impact people so differently. There's some folks like myself who have chronic imposter syndrome, where I'm living with it and working through it on a daily basis. Even holding this right now is scary and was a risk. And there are some folks who, it might pop up every once in a while, and it's that, when you're into something new, you're getting the feel for it, but then it kind of goes away. But I really wanted to create a tool that would be supportive, especially for those of us out there who have chronic imposter syndrome, where it just won't, it's just there. And it's holding us back in some way, whether that's personally, professionally, with health, whether that's financially, whether that's with our actual physical health, our mental health, whatever, spiritual health, whatever that looks like. So today, I am going to read an excerpt from the book. I also have the author of the foreword on the line. I am going to be honest, it is my mom, who I'm very proud of, Dr. Julie Cloxton. She is a clinical social worker and has done, I've just grown up watching her just be an amazing human. So I was very honored when I asked her if she would write the foreword from her experience and expertise, and she said yes. So we'll have her speak, and then I might have another guest on to say a couple of words who was a pre-reader of the book. So yeah, why don't we dive in and get started? Before I start, something I like for folks to name. And like I said, if you're comfortable, please answer this question. If you're not, that's totally okay. But how many of you here personally have imposter syndrome and or have experienced it at some point in your life? Show of hands. Yeah, thank you. Okay, everybody on camera. Okay, I got a few people off camera also in chat saying yeah. So I like to start off that way because I want to recognize that we're not alone. Imposter syndrome can make you feel very siloed and like you're by yourself, maybe even sometimes embarrassed that you feel the way you do. And so I really like to start with the point of like, you're not alone. Other people are experiencing what you're experiencing. It might not be the exact same way, but you're not alone in the way that you're feeling. And so I think there's a lot of power in knowing that. So yeah, thank you all for being so honest and sharing that. And so why don't I get started by actually reading from the book? This is my first book launch too, so I'm like, I don't know which order to do these things in. So I figured I'd dive in and just like read an excerpt. And then my mom, the author of the foreword, is actually going to ask a couple of questions, do an interview. We'll have time to also hear from her experience with the foreword, and then time for Q&A. So, okay. I'm going to start reading now. I got to put on my librarian voice. Um, Chapter 4, Naming Emotions. Never be ashamed of what you feel. You have the right to feel any emotion that you want and do what makes you happy. Demi Lovato. It's no secret that we all have emotions. Some folks may be more in tune with their emotions than others. Others may face challenges regulating emotions, and some have been taught and have learned to consistently hide their emotions and bottle them up. This learned behavior of bottling up emotions is usually rooted in fear. The fear that emotions are weakness that could be used as leverage to be judged and taken advantage of. No matter where you are with understanding your emotion, this chapter is a great opportunity to check in with yourself and expand your capacity for emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. We'll be discussing how to name your emotions so you can identify, acknowledge, and accept that they are a part of you. It is an important piece when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome and learning to lean into your personal development. It may not feel easy to name your emotions, especially if you have the belief system in place to ignore them until they pass. But let me assure you, this chapter will offer you some freedom and a potential breakthrough, especially if you have the mindset of feeling like a fraud. What are emotions? I hope you're ready for a bit of a science lesson. We all have emotions, but have you ever given thought to what emotions are? To put in layman's terms, emotions are evolutionary triggers that help humans survive in a chaotic world. However, if you really wanted to get scientifically technical, the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute defines emotions as biological states that come about as a result of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We are equipped with a set of predictable responses to situations. These responses can trigger basic emotions such as anger, fear, happiness or joy, and sadness. The way you react to situations can trigger your mood and have physical effects on your body. The happiness drugs. When you feel happy, your brain often releases 4 main chemicals. Some may refer to them as happiness drugs: endorphins, I almost want to say Oxycontin, which is not a happiness drug, by the way. It's oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. When you're happy, it becomes a vast ripple effect. You are in a positive mood, you have an extra bounce in your step, you laugh all the time, you laugh all the time, and the smallest things excite you. People love to be around your positive energy, and your entire day feels extraordinary. The not so happy chemical. Now, what happens when you feel upset or frustrated? Your brain still releases a chemical, but instead, it's in the form of a negative energy called cortisol. When cortisol is released into your system, it feels like a storm is washing away all of your happiness. You seem to be upset about everything. You frown, you cry, and nothing pleases you. People generally avoid this behavior and and they're afraid that something they say to you or the way they act could set you off. It still creates a ripple effect, but not a very good one. When you exhibit negative emotions, it feels as though nothing good is happening in your life. It feels as though there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Most often, you lose hope in the worst case scenario. You are the boss. Here's something I want you to remember. Consider it to be excellent news. You have the power to control your emotions every day. You can stop your emotions from going sideways, where you feel like a toddler having an over-exaggerated tantrum at a store because you didn't get what you want. Instead, you can opt to learn why you feel this way and name how you feel so it doesn't happen again. You are the boss of your emotions. You have the power to choose how and why they affect you. If you are someone who struggles with controlling your own emotions, please know it's okay to get support. Support can come in the form of a coach, a counselor, a therapist, or a support group. You are in charge. It's up to you to build whatever supportive network you need. And that is my excerpt. Scene. Awesome. So thank you all so much for listening. Yeah, why don't we get started? Julie, you agreed, and just so you all know, I call my mom Julie. I always have. Why don't you get started with some of the questions that were listed, and we'll dive into those.
Yes, absolutely. So what I wanted to do is just, first of all, thank Sydney for being the human that she is. She's amazing. And I say that as another human being, but also as someone who's known her all her life. And so I am going to ask Sydney some questions because I think it's important for Sydney to talk about her book project, for her to connect with other people, and because I really, really, really want to be the person who helps her to launch this project off for the first time. So, Sydney, the first question that I have for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned, before fully getting started and reading the excerpt, is that I had an experience where I worked for others, and I really felt like I was always being diminished, and like constantly, whether I was making up this story, like I was creating this narrative in my head or not, if it was actually truly happening, that I was constantly being told to stay in my lane, right? Know my place. And, I could remember at one job I was, it wasn't even my job, but somehow they put it on me to be the secretary during board meetings, which, by the way, is an actual position for boards. And so somehow I ended up being the secretary, even though I wasn't on the board. It was really weird. But I would be in these meetings and have ideas and share, and it was kind of like, why are you speaking? Like, why are you in this space? You're here just to be a clerk. And so having multiple experiences like that really helped to feel my imposter syndrome. Also, I'm dyslexic. It's a hidden disability. Not a lot of people know about my dyslexia because I have found workarounds, like many people do, with disabilities, to show up in a space that's not always friendly to folks with disabilities, or usually not friendly to folks with disabilities. So even as an adult, I've walked into rooms where I've caught my coworkers cackling at the fact that, like, I spelt something wrong. And they're all in an office or in a corner, like, oh, did you see that? Like, I actually caught them like, oh, did you see what she did? And laughing at that. So having experiences like that have really shaped, or had really shaped, my imposter syndrome, to make me feel like, ooh, like, can I actually be a business owner? Can I actually write a book? Like, are these things that I really can do? Can I apply for that job? And I just was ready. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, if I'm honest with you. I was like, there has to be more to life than this, than feeling like this. So yeah, that's kind of my shortened journey with like how I got to this space. And really why I wanted to write something like this to share with others too, who might be feeling the same way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important for people to hear that as a mental health and a disability normalizer. If we hide behind the stigmas that are perpetuated against people in society, things don't ever change. And I would say people like you and I, Sydney, who do live with disabilities, they are unseen. They're definitely not invisible because we deal with them every single day. So if to no one else, we get to see them. They're in our face every day. And so I just want to commend you, because stepping out and doing the work that you do, despite the disabilities that you live with, is a big deal. So the second question that I have is, what was your writing process like for this book? And I want you to, talk about it from whatever direction you want to talk about it from, but being that you've shared that you live with disabilities, maybe you can share from that perspective as well.
Yeah. So writing this book, I really had to take my time with figuring out how I was going to approach it. For a couple of reasons. One, with my dyslexia, I love writing, but it's a challenge and it takes like 2 or 3 times longer than a lot of people. So I use a lot of tools, even in my daily life, to like send messages, to write proposals. I do a lot of like dictation. Google has a really cool, like if you're on the actual Google Chrome browser and you go to Google Docs, they actually have a dictation mode in Google Docs where you can speak to text. So using tools like that, along with like, thank God I was born in the 90s when the internet like was actually a thing. And because Ask Jeeves was like my dude for a long time until Google came around. And I was like, Jeeves, how do you spell blah, blah, blah? But now Siri also has been a really good replacement for that, where I'm just like, hey Siri, which she's about to respond. But hey, hey Siri, like, how do you spell blah, blah, blah? And then Siri will read it back to me. So I've used a lot of tools like that as workarounds. I also this time worked in partnership with a ghostwriter to help me too. So the whole book, I did the full outline myself, and got really detailed with the outline. And then me and a ghostwriter worked together, which is why I was able to actually get this book done so quickly. A lot of people are like, how did you do it that fast? And I'm like, because I was not writing all the does, ands, and buts, right? Like I provided the meats and potato to the book, and someone else helped me with actually formulating everything else around that. And I want to normalize that too, because I think some people feel like there's some shame around using supportive tools like that, like as if it cheapens the actual book itself, but it doesn't. To me, it doesn't. I don't see any problem with that. So yeah, that's kind of my journey with writing the book. I will also say too that before this book came out, I actually I was invited to join an anthology project, which was really great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cheryl. Yeah, working smarter, not harder. Yeah, because my time's limited too, right? But I was invited to do an anthology project, and that also helped me get my feet wet and work around some of that mindset of like, ooh, like who wants to hear what you have to say? Like, right? Like, why would anybody want to hear what you have to say? That's something I used to tell myself all the time. And then after doing that and doing a small chapter in that anthology, I was able to get feedback from people who were like, wow, like your story really made a difference. Like I had no idea what you shared in this happened to you, or like this was your lived experience. And now I'm seeing, a different perspective than my own. And getting feedback like that was really amazing, because I was like, oh God, people are going to think it's garbage. Like they're gonna be like, oh, this trash. I was saying all these negative things. So like I said, I deal with imposter syndrome. At no point do I pretend like I have all of the answers and this book is like the Bible to solving problems or anything, but it is a tool to support folks. And some of the tools are, and all of the tools that I use to help myself daily keep moving forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I thank you so much for your transparency and your openness, and just normalizing that you can do a lot of things, and also you can accept supports and services that are out there in the world for us. So I just want to ask you one more question. And I think I'm going to ask you, because you're very busy, I think I'm going to ask you how do you balance writing with the other aspects of your life? Because you are a pretty successful business person. And I just want to say before you respond to that, that people often think individuals who live with neurodiversities, that they are not functioning individuals, or that they can't simultaneously be very gifted or brilliant in a particular area and also struggle in another area. They think it's an all or nothing. And they also do not understand that neurodiversities are on a spectrum. And so even the neurodiversities that I live with are not necessarily going to come across the way a person's expecting them to. And so just want to say, you do a lot. And so I want to know how you do it, because I'm doing a lot and I don't really stop to think how I do what I do.
Yeah, I mean, well, first, I think it had a lot to do with like just determination. Like I really was at a point where I was like, I really want to do this book. And so I had made up my mind where I was like, no, like this is something that I definitely am going to set a SMART goal towards, which is also a tool that I mentioned in the book. SMART goals is not something new. Like I said, I don't claim to be, oh, I have this like new life-changing thing that you haven't heard of before. But it has been very helpful because what it did is it gave me focus on actually getting this done and making it a top priority for me to accomplish. Um, I don't know. I mean, I just use Google Calendars. Like, if I even schedule in time, like for you and I, like you want to go to lunch, you want me to come over to your house? Okay, I got to put it on the calendar. Like that's just how I live my life because my partner and I, some of you on the line know this and some of you don't, but we became instant parents to a now 12-year-old about a year and a half ago. So my life it's not mine's anymore. I can't be selfish with my schedule. They're in competitive sports. They do things after school. So I just had to figure out a way to carve out some time to make this a priority and to get it done. The thing I will say is ghostwriting was awesome because it also allowed me to free up some of that time that I wouldn't have normally been able to do. Like this book would have taken a couple of years. And that's okay, but I had like a set goal. I wanted to get it done by a certain amount of time. And that really sped up the process.
Thank you so much for answering those questions, Sydney. And often I think that you were you were my miracle, because even though that's Raven's middle name, you inspired me in so many different ways because I was younger, and just watching you and how you interacted with your peers, how you interacted with your instructors, your people in the community, just the way you have excelled in life has been an absolute joy to see it. And I'm very, very proud of you. And so I just wanted to say that because you are truly, truly a beautiful person. And so with that, I don't want to get us too far off of time. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to introduce myself. I think everybody here has probably heard you introduce me. And then I can't see if there are other people who have come in, but I just want to say I'm really glad to be here. Thank you all for being here to support Sydney and to support this book project. Do you want me to go ahead and go with?
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead and get started. You're just going to speak and then we'll do Q&A.
Okay.
We'll do Q&A after.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Julie Cloxton, and I am Sydney's mother, but I also consider Sydney a very masterful business coach. She's been somebody who has helped me as I'm a solopreneur to maintain and to hold down a lot of different aspects of business. She's very business minded, very educated in those areas, and is just amazing with it. So that has been something that's been really helpful for me. I would say this is my 30th year of working with individuals with disabilities, and I am also a social worker. I've probably been a social worker longer than I've held the title, I would say. In everything that I've done, I infused social work into it because that's my heart, is for people. And let's see, what else do I want to tell you about myself? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about why I wrote the foreword for Sydney. So imposter syndrome is something that I think a lot of people deal with. I think it's something that some people have gotten angry about the term, and I can get with that. I think it's a phenomenon that is perpetuated by systemic issues. I feel like it is something that really oppresses society because it comes in and it tells us that we're not perfect enough, or that we're not doing something in the way that we should be doing it, or we're not speaking the way we should be speaking. And so one of the ways that I have gotten around that, because I'm in front of a lot of people being a college professor, is I will just tell my students, you know what? I have learning disabilities. So if I mispronounce something, or if I say a sentence backwards, I just need y'all to tell me if I don't catch myself. And I keep it pushing, because I've started to learn that even though I might have those disabilities, that I have other abilities that I can pour into my students and into my classes. And so that has really helped me. But with every project I do it pretty much afraid. And I think that imposter syndrome can be very harmful, because it can literally squash the dreams and the hopes that we have, and it can change our trajectory if we don't get it under control. So I just want to say that those are the reasons why, when Sydney talked to me about doing this forward, that I did, because I'm already working on a lot of projects, but I felt like it was really important to just to talk about this topic. So the next thing that we're going to do is,
Well, I was going to ask you too, after reading the book, is there, because I know you have, tons of students and you work with several clients privately, is there a tool or something from the reading that maybe like sparked anything in you that would be a good resource to share with others, or something that was new from the book that you took away from it? I'm just curious.
I think because I've met with you and you've coached me through a lot of imposter syndrome, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily new, but one of the things that I would say is that you give me a lot of courage more than anything, because you took on this great writing a book is not an easy thing to do. I wrote an anthology with some amazing talented and brilliant individuals, and just the little bit that I had to write for that project was it's a lot. The whole project in and of itself is a lot. And then now I'm writing on a whole different level, and I can't utilize a lot of the tools that I would normally utilize, but I'm able to push through because I'm like, you know what? I've watched Sydney do this. I've watched her go and do an outline, which is something I really struggle with, is making an outline. I struggle with time management. I struggle with a lot of the tools that you use. And so going through my head and thinking about not necessarily the book itself, but the process you went through to go from A to Z with it, that for me is what really sets things apart for me.
Cool, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. And, I really appreciate your perspective, in the Ford. I know on Amazon, there's a preview if you're on your desktop. If you're on your cell phone, you can't see the text preview, but if you're on your desktop, you can. And your Ford is actually a part of that preview, along with my letter to folks. So I know you talked a lot about even in childhood, imposter syndrome was instilled in you when your counselor showed up. Well, first off, didn't show up to one of your meetings when you were getting prepped for college, and then showed up the next time and said you weren't cut out for school and you should just think about doing something else. So that's happening all the time to folks in many different ways. And so I appreciate you just being very open and honest and vulnerable with sharing your experience, because I know it's going to support others too. I do want to open it up to Q&A. Like I said, I didn't have any like one particular outline for today, but I did want to leave some space. If you guys have any questions, like no questions off. I'm a very honest person. So you might be shocked if you get an answer and you're like, whoa, did she just say that? I'll keep it YouTube appropriate. I got a question here. How do you work through imposter syndrome? Like personally, at this point, well, I will say this, the first thing was actually understanding what it was. So like I said at the beginning, when I asked folks, how many of you here have imposter syndrome? And you raised your hand, and some people might have been like, well, I'm not sure yet, but a few people were like me, like raising both hands. Just honestly, by understanding and admitting if that's something that you do have is huge, right? And then finding a community of other folks and individuals who may feel similarly, so that you don't feel separated and alone, or talking to a therapist or a partner or whatever support you have. Also too, what was really helpful for me was really starting to reframe my negative thoughts. That is a skill that it's not, it's like going to the gym, honestly, right? Like I wish I could go to the gym once and lose however much weight and get fit. But that's not how life works. And the same thing happens when it's you working on your mindset. You literally have to check into the gym almost daily. And that's with any practice that you do, whether that's mental, physical, spiritual, like it's like a daily check-in. And so one of the things that I do daily is when I start creating a negative narrative in my head, is I will like literally stop myself before I go too far down the rabbit hole. And I'll be like, okay, you're saying this. Like, why are you saying that? Like, are you just making something up because you feel a certain way? Are you creating what story are you creating around this? And then I'll ask myself, like, is that true? Um, you know, so when I told you about being nervous about publishing this book, I was like, well, who wants to hear from me? And then I was like, wait a minute, pause. Like, you have already talked about imposter syndrome in front of crowds of a couple hundred people. Like, people want to hear what you have to say. Like, I had to literally do that to myself. That is a conversation I had to myself. So definitely I talk to myself a lot. It might weird out some people. Sometimes it's out loud, sometimes it's just in my head. But yeah, just catching myself. That's been my biggest thing, and that's where I'm at now. Did I start out that way? Not necessarily. I had to build up to it, but that's kind of the maintenance tool I'm using right now. It's just reframing and actually slowing down and pausing and asking myself tough questions. And y'all can come off chat too if you want to ask in person. Like I don't want you to feel like you just have to type, but there are some coming through. Let's see. Another one is, do you and Julie, if you don't mind too, if you see questions rolling in through the chat, just keeping an eye out. But do you have topics that you're hoping to write about in the future? Great one. Thanks, Eileen. I think she had to drop off. Or no, she's here. Yeah, there are some topics that I really like. Hey, By the way, my friend Eileen's here and she's an amazing Irish dancer. So, if you don't mind dropping into the chat some of your St. Patty's Day events, that'd be awesome because you're really good. And I just want to shout that out. And don't call it the river dance. It's not the river dance. That's just one play. It's called Irish dancing. See, I remembered. But yeah, I do have a book on leadership that I would like to get to writing, and just some like practical tools around what is impactful and effective leadership. I don't know, there are some like fictional books that I would love to get to too eventually. But they're not as like pressing. I just have a really big imagination. Like I love reading when I was younger. Even now I still read, but I just would like be at the library all the time, huh, Julie? I mean, like I lived at the library, so I was like always reading, devouring books. I love young adult fiction, so I have thought about like doing something. I've had a couple people come up and like, you should do a kids book, and I'm like, why did you tell me this? They must know something I don't, right? But yeah, so yeah, there will be more things in the future. I just don't have like a specific topic outside of the leadership one I would like to do. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe some kind of sultry romance novel. I don't know. Um, let's see. Any other questions?
I don't have a question,
Yeah.
but I just want to say thank you. Um, just thank you for normalizing. I would just say, as a person who is neurodivergent, I would say probably maybe 6 years ago, I would not have even thought about that was kind of like something that was a part of me, even imposter syndrome, like on a daily, even with what I want to do. Like when you said that it's just like checking into the gym daily, like literally, like I have conversations with myself. Sometimes I'm talking out loud. So, you know, thank you for not letting me feel like I'm alone. But like I have to have conversations, like pep talks, like cheerleading. And it's so interesting. I'm always analyzing, well, where exactly did this like originate from? Like what was that root, like
Mm.
pivotal moment? And so I guess the question did just arise. What did you find or discover that pivotal moment for you?
Oh, well, I don't know if it was one particular moment or if it was like just a collection of moments over time. I do a lot of DEI work and I talk about like microaggressions, right? And one of the videos that I show in these trainings is like about mosquito bites, right? And comparing microaggressions to mosquito bites and how one mosquito bite, you're not like gonna die or anything. It's annoying. But when you constantly over and over and over again are getting these mosquito bites, that's when it becomes like noticeable, right? And uncomfortable and really irritating. So in regards to like one pivotal moment, I don't know if I had just like one situation where I was like, oh my God, like I don't believe in myself, you know? I
Yeah.
think over time it was just multiple little things, incremental things, from everything from like teachers saying, oh, like with my dyslexia, teachers saying, well, she's just lazy. She's really bright, but she's lazy and doesn't like doing spelling. So
Hmm.
that's just what it is. And then I know my mom would be at home. She was my biggest advocate, and I would be in tears because I would just spend, you know, 3 hours going over spelling in third grade, literally as a third grader, 3 hours going over spelling. And then to have someone say you're lazy is like disheartening. I'm trying not to cry, but that I would say that's a keystone. Um,
Yeah,
it's invoking a lot of emotions. Um,
totally.
but even just with, I've always been plus size and then bigger. So having kids and adults make assumptions about myself saying, oh, well, why don't you dress nicer or look nicer? Because I've always just been about wearing comfortable clothing. I mean, there's just all these little moments that add up and collect like mosquito bites. So I think that's where it comes from. Sorry, I'm gonna start crying.
No, I didn't mean for you to, I didn't mean
No.
to evoke emotion, but it's like what you said, because I was, I do remember you saying it was a moment at work, but like, for me, even when I had to sit with the fact that, okay, is this really what it is? Like, the imposter syndrome, because I'm very analytic and I didn't, I guess that's why, I went to the direction of psychology and clinical mental health, because I wanted to get behind, all of that. And so for me, myself in childhood, just kind of like looking at those moments, like you said, it's just like people making you feel less than, and you're already, you know, kind of like, I would say for myself, maybe a double, triple minority, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And so that's compounding it. But I would just have these moments that just pop up, and I'm a mother of four, and one of my sons, it's like I just realized, okay, and then I'll stop because it's just making me think. But like I was on my mat maybe one day a month ago, and mat meaning I practice yoga,
Mhm.
and so even with through all of that, just getting the confidence to just kind of like say, yeah, I can go beyond my practice to teach other people this. But I'm on my mat and I'm listening to the instructor, and all of a sudden it popped in my head. I'm like, all right, so like something, maybe it's just not my day, but like I was getting like in my head just kind of like the messaging of what she said. So, and I'm just noticing, I'm being aware. And so like when going to the other side in the pose, there was no issue. So I'm just like, huh. But then my son popped in. Now I was an advocate for my son, who I fought for him when he was in, elementary school, because I noticed these things and the teachers were sending home his work with like, just red marker. That's a trigger for some people. He was getting very upset with getting the red marks and all of this. And so I just started to just pay more attention. So I was just like, it might be mild dyslexia. So going to, schedule a meeting, having the board there, getting an IEP for him, making sure that he had the tools that he needed. Um, and so I guess when me being on that mat, it's just like, well, holy crap, like maybe there was a form of mild dyslexia for me, just going over the family and how the family generational kind of like handles certain things. We as my family, we just didn't make a big deal out of things, and we kind of like had to figure it out. I just remember my mom having to take my brother to speech therapy. I remember my cousin, male. So it's just like, of course, like, my son may have, but I just kind of like gave him the tools. And so even today, like when I told him that I had that, he popped in, just wanted to know how he was doing. I called him up. He's a firefighter now in New York, but he's just like, he had been thinking about that certain thing, that same thing for about a month in regards to how he even made it through school, how he even made it through his fireman training, because he still gets a lot of things,
Mhm.
out of whack. But just normalizing it. And I'm just like, this is what, it is labeled. This doesn't mean that you are this. It's just you have
Right.
to find workarounds. And I guess that's why I'm bringing it back around to like your experiences, like, you know, what kept you going to just not really fall into that victimization of like attaching to that label fully, like knowing that you can do whatever you want to do. Like, yeah, this is what I'm dealing with, but this is not who I am.
Yeah, and I appreciate something you just said there too, Ananda, with the languaging is like, a lot of times we tell ourselves like, I am, and it's like, no, 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 you're not, you have, right? Which is it is actually different, just like that change of the word, right? So like, I am dyslexic, and I know I started off by saying that I am dyslexic. No, I have dyslexia. I am not my learning disability. I just happen to have the learning disability. I have extra weight, right? I have obesity. I'm probably like a weird person, but I'll say it like that's clinically what I have. Not everybody likes to say that, but I am not fat. You get what I'm saying? Like, I am not just my weight. So I really appreciate you pointing that out, because I think with the way that we are taught to say things and to language things, we then start to embody those things and also create our own cage too, with what we're saying and how we introduce ourselves and how we think about ourselves. But yeah, for me, it definitely was a culmination of things. And it's like mosquito bites, and that's what still feels it, you know. I'm a participant in my own imposter syndrome, which I'm really breaking that, right, and becoming resistant to by doing these practices and tools in the book. But also too, still today, I talk to people all the time about being a woman of color in nature. I love getting outdoors. I don't do it often, but I love being outdoors. And I went on a walk in an affluent neighborhood because it's a public space, but they have all the private parking. So you can't get there publicly to access it, right? In like Cherry Hills, Cherry Creek area, public space, no public parking. But I found a way to get there, and a woman was walking her dog and was talking. And then she said, you don't look like you belong here. Oh, I don't? Why not? It's a public space. There's 50 other people out today walking their dogs. Why don't I look like I belong here? And so like, when that kind of stuff happens, it fuels the imposter syndrome too. So I have to catch that too and reframe and say, like, it's not you, and you are welcome. I have to tell myself, like, you're welcome to go to these spaces. You belong in these spaces. You deserve to take up room. You deserve to use your voice. You can speak back. So, yeah.
I think it's Ananda, right? Thank you so much for speaking, because this is how we normalize things. And I want to say, Sydney, I have watched her since she was a kid have to battle imposter syndrome. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know that I had it. I didn't know that it was the way society is fashioned. It's the fabric of society, right? If we don't fit in a box, then we're outside of the box. And everyone's going to let you know. And the further away from being inside that box you get, the more you're going to be shunned. And so I have watched Sydney go through, as she mentioned, teachers saying, oh, she's so smart. There's no, and I would be telling them, something's going on here. Oh, no, she just doesn't like spelling. She's great with math. Like, that's her thing. And I said, no. People don't just choose not to be able to do certain things or to struggle with certain things. Like, that's just not a choice people do. That's just not what human nature is, right? We don't choose to struggle with things. And I had to really advocate, but Sydney was her biggest advocate, because at the time I was not diagnosed neurodiverse either at the time. And so she had to really advocate for herself. And through her advocacy, it really taught me a lot about advocating, and I advocated for her. And then it just takes one person to really, if a person really cares about you, they're going to do something to support you. They're going to do something to help you. You all know, okay? And so it just takes one person. She had one teacher.
Oh yeah, Miss Jones.
Miss Jones.
I love Miss Jones. Yeah.
And her other teachers, a lot of them were great, but it took one teacher to say, I'm a partner with you in this fight. And we got the school to test her, and they kept telling me with every test, because they have the battery of tests they go through, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. If I'm going to diagnose her with anything, it's with giftedness. And I would say, that's great, because you do know you can do this and that, right? And they would say, no, really, we're not seeing nothing. We're not seeing nothing. And then they got to this last test. And the woman said, you know what? I gotta say, I'm glad you pushed us forward, because she tested high, very high in everything. And then this one area, it showed up. And I just think that we have to like be very open about what our challenges are, because all of us got something. And if I asked you to look to the left and then to look to the right, even if you're in these squares on Zoom, you're not going to see the stress and the trauma and the challenges that another person has. But I can assure you that we all got some. And so I'm just real open about mine. And I think it has actually helped me to be a better professor. So when I go into a class, especially my students who know me know, but if I'm in another class, I will say to them, by the way, I have disabilities. And so I want to say your name correctly, and I want to not misgender you and say your pronouns correctly. If I do either one of those, you can correct me and it's okay. I also want you to know if I say something backwards, that's a part of my disability, or my speech. I can't always formulate words in the way that other people can. And so I will tell them, if I say something and you can't understand it, I'm asking you to let me know. And I may even have y'all say the word, because I might not be able to get there. but it doesn't mean I can't teach them. It doesn't mean that they can't learn from me. And Sydney's been that person who has pressed forward continuously. She has not let it stop her. She has not ever once allowed imposter syndrome to stop her, because imposter syndrome is only a thing because of the society we live in. I firmly believe that, because otherwise, how would we know? We're not, the people with the barriers are not the issue. The barriers are the issue.
Well, and
if we didn't have the barriers, we wouldn't even know.
Well, and I was going to say, we definitely live in a society too that we don't focus on our gifts, right? We focus on what we're not good at. So when you think about it, a kid goes to school, they're not good at math. Oh, well, then you need to work harder. You need to push yourself harder. And it's almost like a punishment, instead of saying, whoa, like, you're really good at this one thing. Like, yes, math is important, but how can we really highlight and celebrate this thing that you're good at? So I know there's a lot of writings and talks around focusing on your gifts. And I wish that's how the world operated, because I feel like people would have less imposter syndrome if we could focus on those things. And I know there was a great question. I want to get to it really quick also in the chat before we close out. Just, what felt different when writing the book, whether that means, was there something that had resistance and vulnerability all the way to like fun, juicy? And I will say, letter from the author definitely had the most vulnerability and felt the most scary and risky, because you could go to my LinkedIn and look at my past work experience and kind of figure out which companies I'm talking about that I worked at, right? So there's always like that risk of being vulnerable. Also, like, just sharing something so personal, and people could say that it's trash or getting attacked for it or whatever. Like, there's always that. But then also something that I loved writing was eliminating BS. I don't know. I just thought that was funny, because I used BS like bullshit, but it's belief systems. So eliminating limiting belief systems. That's a chapter I really liked writing. I also really liked the emotions one, the excerpt that I picked to read at the beginning, because I feel like we all have emotions, but we don't always understand what those emotions are and where they come from. And COVID really highlighted that for me with other human beings. Like, everything from some people were very calm and chill, all the way to, oh my God, the world is on fire. What am I going to do tomorrow? And so just being able to see humanness in so many different ways in such a short time really showed me the emotions piece. So yeah, those are some of my favorite chapters. So yeah, thanks for asking Sarah that question. I recognize too, it's already one. Like I honestly was like, this is going to be 10 minutes long. So I appreciate you guys or you all for staying and hanging out and being here and, asking questions and your love and encouragement and sharing and buying the book and all the things. I couldn't be who I am without having the community like you all around me. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to stay on if anybody has questions. I can hang out for another couple of minutes and get those answered. But I also want to respect if anybody has to leave. I just wanted to say thank you. And in the chat, I know my mom dropped the link, but I will put it on here again.
I can put it on there and you can answer questions. I see Lynn has her hand up, so maybe she has a question.
All right, go for it.
Hey, Sydney.
Hi.
This is Lynn, and I just want to say you did a fabulous job, and I am so proud of you. I mean, over the years, I've just seen you bloom. So keep up the good work, and I'm here to support you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Lynn. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Just so y'all know, Lynn and I go back years at this point. I don't even know if I didn't have Jaden, and I don't know if Buddy was even born.
Yeah,
maybe
he
was he born?
Yeah.
So just to put some context there, he was a baby, I think, or very little. He's going to be 24 soon. So yeah, so thank you so much. It means the world that you would take time out of your day to come, and all of you. I just want to say, because we know that when you came here, that took time out of your life that you can't get back, but you chose to be here today, and that means a lot. And then I want to shout out, I see my sisterhooded friend Cheryl Ferguson. Dr. Cheryl Ferguson is her name, and she and I went through school together as we were working on our doctorates, and we made it through. And she's just a brilliant individual who just has a beautiful heart. And so I just am so grateful that both of these two individuals will come today and support Sydney.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for being here. I know everybody on the line that's still on the line personally too. So I appreciate you, Ananda and Carrie and Hillary and Eileen and Jennifer and Sarita. And also to Dr. Cheryl and Miss Lynn. Like, I appreciate all of you and my partner, Matt. He's on here too.
Is Matt here? I can't see everybody.
Yeah, he's not on camera, but he's here. He's sitting right next to me.
Oh, hey, Matt.
So thank you all so much. And just for your, like I said, your love and encouragement. And yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and feel free to connect anytime in the future. So yeah. All right. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye.
you.